Echoes across time. The morning fog rolled gently across the Thames, wrapping around the ancient stones of the Tower of London like a familiar embrace. Sarah Mitchell pressed her palm against the cool glass of the museum window, watching the mist that's between the medieval towers. As the newest curator at the Museum of Imperial History, she had spent countless hours among the artifacts, but today felt different. Today, she would finally open the sealed archive that had remained untouched for over a century. The weight of history seemed to settle on her shoulders as she walked through the quiet corridors. Each step echoed softly against the polished floors, creating a rhythm that matched the steady beat of her heart. The museum held the memories of an empire that once spanned continents, touching every corner of the globe, from the spice routes of India to the vast landscapes of Canada, from the gold fields of Australia to the trading posts of Africa. The British Empire had left its mark on the world in ways both magnificent and troubling. Sarah's fingers trembled slightly as she inserted the antique key into the archive door. The lock turned with a satisfying click that seemed to whisper secrets from centuries past. The heavy door swung open, releasing the scent of old parchment and forgotten dreams. Dust motes danced in the pale light filtering through a single window, creating tiny galaxies that reminded her of the vast distances the empire had once crossed. Inside the archive, leather-bound journals lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Each volume contained the personal accounts of those who had lived through the empire's rise and fall: governors and soldiers, merchants and missionaries. Families torn apart by distance and duty, all had left their stories behind. Sarah ran her fingers along the spines, feeling the texture of time itself beneath her touch. She pulled down a journal, bound in deep burgundy leather, its pages yellowed with age. The first entry was dated 1583, written in the careful script of a young merchant named Thomas Hartwell. His words painted vivid pictures of London's bustling docks, where ships prepared to sail toward unknown horizons. He wrote of his excitement and fear as he prepared to join an expedition to establish new trade routes. His dreams were filled with adventure and fortune, though he could never have imagined the complex legacy that would unfold over the following centuries. As Sarah continued reading, she discovered that Thomas had sailed to the Caribbean, where he witnessed both the breathtaking beauty of tropical islands and the harsh realities of colonial life. His journal entries grew more reflective as the months passed. He wrote about the indigenous peoples he encountered, their sophisticated knowledge of the land, and his growing unease with the way they were treated by his fellow colonists. The problem that had brought Sarah to this archive began to crystallize as she read. For months she had been struggling with how to present the empire's history in a way that honored both its achievements and acknowledged its failures. The museum's new exhibition was meant to tell the complete story. But how could she balance the tales of exploration and innovation with the painful realities of exploitation and oppression? Hours passed unnoticed as Sarah moved from journal to journal. She read the account of Margaret Wellington, a governor's wife in 1750s India, who described the magnificent palaces of Rajasthan, while also recording her deep loneliness and her growing respect for Indian culture. There was Captain James Morrison, who had served in the American colonies during the 1770s, writing with surprising empathy about the colonists' desire for independence, even as he remained loyal to the crown. Each story revealed the human complexity behind the grand historical narrative. These were not simply tales of conquest or heroism, but intimate portraits of people trying to make sense of their place in a rapidly changing world. A missionary in Africa struggled with doubts about imposing his beliefs on communities with their own rich spiritual traditions. A trader in Hong Kong wrestled with the moral implications of the opium trade while supporting his family back in England. As the afternoon light began to fade, Sarah discovered something unexpected tucked between the pages of a journal from 1920. It was a letter, still sealed, addressed simply to the future keeper of these stories. Her hands shook as she carefully opened the envelope, mindful not to damage the delicate paper. The letter was written by Elizabeth Thornton, the archive's original curator. In elegant handwriting, she had penned a message across time to whoever finds this letter. I hope you understand that history is not a single story, but a tapestry woven from countless threads. Each journal in this archive represents a life lived, a choice made, a moment when someone stood at the crossroads of history. The empire we served was both magnificent and flawed, as are all human endeavors. Your task is not to judge, but to help others understand that every great story contains multitudes. Elizabeth's words continued, describing her own struggle to make sense of the empire's legacy in the aftermath of the Great War. She had watched as the old certainties crumbled, as the world began to question the very foundations of imperial rule. Yet she had also recognized the genuine connections forged between cultures, the innovations sparked by contact between different peoples, and the individual acts of courage and compassion that had occurred even within flawed systems. Remember, Elizabeth had written that those who came before us were as complex as we are. They were capable of both great beauty and terrible mistakes, often within the same breath. Show them as they were, human beings struggling to do what they believed was right, even when they were terribly wrong. Sarah sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of understanding settling over her simultaneously. The gentle twist she had discovered was not in the archives themselves, but in the realization that her challenge had been faced before. Elizabeth Thornton had grappled with the same questions decades earlier, and her wisdom had been waiting patiently for someone to find it. As the sun set over London, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson that had witnessed centuries of history, Sarah knew how to approach her exhibition. She would not shy away from the empire's failures, nor would she dismiss its achievements. Instead, she would present the stories, as Elizabeth had suggested, as human tales of people navigating extraordinary circumstances. The exhibition would feature Thomas Hartwell's growing awareness of colonial injustice alongside his genuine wonder at discovering new worlds. It would show Margaret Wellington's isolation and her appreciation for Indian art and philosophy. It would present Captain Morrison's loyalty and his sympathy for American independence. Each story would be complete, complex, and honest. Sarah carefully returned the journals to their places, but she kept Elizabeth's letter. As she locked the archive door, she felt a profound sense of connection stretching backward and forward through time. The empire itself had ended, transformed into the Commonwealth and the independent nations that had once been colonies. But the human stories remained, waiting to teach new generations about the complexity of the past and the importance of understanding rather than judgment. Walking through the museum one final time that evening, Sarah felt the presence of all those who had contributed to the imperial story. They were not heroes or villains, but people who had shaped the world through their choices, their dreams, and their struggles. Tomorrow, she would begin creating an exhibition that honored their full humanity, just as Elizabeth Thornton had hoped someone would do. The fog had lifted from the Thames, revealing the lights of a city that had grown from a small Roman settlement into the heart of a global empire, and now into a modern metropolis looking toward the future. The story continued, as it always had, one human choice at a time.